The sky was dark, and the quiet of the morning was shattered by the sound of oars slicing through the water. A fleet of longships appeared on the horizon, their sails black as storm clouds, moving faster than anyone had ever seen. Smoke curled from the little village ahead. Monks screamed as fire spread across wooden buildings. Treasure chests tumbled into the dirt. Families ran, clutching children, hearts hammering, not knowing if they would survive. This was Lindisfarne, and the Vikings had arrived. They were not just soldiers, they were men shaped by a frozen land where winters could kill a family in a week. They were fishermen, farmers, sons who had learned to fight because survival demanded it. Imagine being 14, looking at endless snow and barren fields, knowing that your only escape might be the sea. That was their world. That was why they left everything familiar behind, setting sail not for adventure, but for life itself. Europe had never seen anything like this. No warning came, no army defended the shores, just chaos and fear. People who had spent their lives in quiet prayer now faced axes and shields. Their world felt like it was tearing apart. And yet, behind the fear, the Vikings were not monsters. They laughed at the wind whipping their hair. They cheered when the first chest of silver tumbled into their hands. And they worried for their brothers in the cold night when the waves threatened to capsize their small ships. The Vikings moved with terrifying speed because of their long ships. Sleek, narrow, and able to slide over rivers as easily as a knife through butter, they were like sports cars on water, unstoppable in a world that had only horses and carts. No city walls were high enough, no river too shallow. They struck, vanished, and left whispers of panic behind. It was cunning, it was precise, and it was horrifying to the people who thought their villages were safe. At first, the raids were short, quick, almost playful in their terror. But then they began to linger. They built fires in foreign lands, dug in through winters, and formed armies where once they were just raiders. Paris trembled when 1,000 men demanded gold to leave the city alone. Imagine being a mayor, standing with your advisors, knowing that if you refuse, your city will burn. But if you pay, you fund the next attack. What would you do? And yet, even as they plundered, the Vikings were human. They loved their families. They feared storms at sea. They laughed at a good joke after a day of struggle. Over time, some of them stayed. They built homes in Normandy, planted seeds in Ireland, and slowly became rulers instead of invaders. The boy who once raided monasteries became a man who governed a city. The terror faded, replaced by law, religion, and the rhythms of daily life. But Europe was not done with them yet. Stronger armies rose, castles grew taller, and the raids became harder to sustain. The era that had begun in fire and fear was fading, leaving the Vikings to blend into the world they had once terrorized. And still the question lingered, would their hunger for the sea, for survival, for glory ever return? And just as the smoke of Lindisfarne faded into memory, whispers spread of another fleet, moving silently under the gray sky. The rivers were quiet that morning, but the longships moved like shadows, silent and deadly. Families in small villages thought the worst was over, that the first raiders had gone. But the Vikings were already on the move, sliding through narrow waterways with terrifying ease. They came for Paris next, their eyes fixed not on the beauty of the city, but on the gold that lined its streets. The people inside had never faced anything like this. Soldiers tightened grips on rusty swords. Children clutched their mothers, whispering prayers into trembling ears. No one knew exactly where the invaders would strike, and that was the brilliance of the Vikings. They struck where the fear was thickest, where chaos would be their ally. The leader of the fleet, A man whose eyes were sharp as an eagle's stared at the city walls. He had sailed hundreds of miles from his frozen homeland, leaving brothers and sisters behind in snow and hunger, chasing nothing but survival and glory. And still, a flicker of doubt passed through him. Could they really take this city, or would the walls of stone finally stop them? When they landed, the city screamed, gates slammed, merchants abandoned stalls, spilling coins into the streets. The Vikings moved quickly, precise, almost surgical. It was not mindless violence, it was a careful, terrifying plan executed by men who had known nothing but struggle since birth. And even as they fought, they were human. One raider hesitated, a coin slipping through his fingers, remembering a sister at home. Another laughed too loudly, startling a comrade. The moments of humanity were tiny, almost invisible, but they were there. The battle stretched on for days. The Vikings demanded tribute, threatening fire and blood if the city refused. Leaders argued, families cowered, and the city's fate hung by a single thread. And then, just when it seemed the worst might be over, another longship appeared on the horizon, smaller, almost hidden, but unmistakable. No one knew if it was friend or foe. Whispers ran through the ranks. Was it reinforcements? Or was the first wave only the beginning of something far worse? The city held its breath, and in the quiet between the waves and the clash of swords, a single question lingered in every heart. Would anyone survive the next tide of terror? The city had survived, for now. Smoke curled from burned outskirts, but walls still stood, and people began to breathe again. Yet the Vikings did not retreat to the sea immediately. Some stayed, setting up camp, learning the streets, watching the people with curious eyes. They were not just conquerors, they were survivors like everyone else, shaped by hunger, frost, and a life that demanded courage. The leader of the Vikings walked among the ruined village, his heavy boots sinking into mud mixed with blood and ash. He saw children hiding under tables, wide-eyed and trembling. Mother tried to comfort them, whispering words they barely understood. And for a fleeting moment, he saw a reflection of his own childhood in the fear of those little faces. The world had made them all survivors in different ways. Over time, some Vikings began to stay, marrying into local families, learning local languages, and even building homes where once they had only burned. They became rulers, not just raiders. Normandy rose from these settlements. Dublin thrived. And in parts of England, the Vikings were no longer invaders. They were neighbors, counselors, even kings. But the story was never simple. There were still clashes, betrayals, storms at sea, and endless questions of loyalty. Each Viking who had once laughed at the chaos had to make a choice: return to the frozen north, or stay in this strange land and build something that could last beyond a single winter. And as Europe grew stronger, walls grew taller, armies became better trained, and the raids that once struck terror slowly faded, leaving only the memory of fear, bravery, and survival. Yet, even as the Viking Age ended, their legacy lingered. Families that had once been threatened by fire and steel now walked the streets they had once feared. Stories of valor and cruelty, of cleverness and humanity were passed down for generations. And somewhere, far to the north, young boys stared at the horizon, dreaming of the sea, wondering if they too could carve their name into the world. The waves crashed quietly on the shore, but in those waves, the whisper of the past remained. The Vikings were gone as raiders, but their shadow, their hunger for the unknown, and the courage to face it would never truly disappear. And in the distance, just beyond the horizon, the sea waited, as it always had, as it always would.